Россия, слишевная наша держава, Россия, lumia наша страна. Russia, the host nation, is who we will be talking about today. So, the home nation, everybody, the team with the most amount of pressure on them heading into this tournament. Opening match against Saudi Arabia, you can expect the atmosphere to be positively electric, and they have the hopes and dreams of millions of spectators watching in the stadiums and from home. The host nation will strive to advance out of the group stage for the first time in the post-USSR era, coming off of a disappointing World Cup in 2014, in a group where they really should have advanced from, upset by Algeria on the final match day. Russia had been landed a favorable group for the 2018 World Cup with Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Uruguay. This is a team who many people suspect would not have qualified if they had to go through that route, and they're probably correct. But Russia will hope that their recent slew of friendlies they've played this year against world-class teams like Brazil and France will give them the sort of experience necessary to make a run potentially in this tournament. And because they qualified as the host nation, they haven't had to play any competitive fixtures. And consequentially, Russia have plummeted in the FIFA rankings. They are outside the world top 50, something that I vehemently, absolutely do not agree with, but that's what happens when you are unable to schedule games outside of competitive fixtures. But earlier this year, Russia played. They were manhandled in a 3-0 loss to Brazil, a 3-1 loss to France. They lost earlier this week to Austria 1-0. But having paid close attention to this Russian team, both as a neutral observer and as somebody who is eyeing a key opponent of my team with keen interest, this is a team that has improved since the 2017 Confederations Cup. Make no mistake about it. That tournament, they exited with 3 points with only a victory against New Zealand and 2 losses against Mexico and Portugal. But since then, they have sorted out their striker woes. It looks like Dmitry Smolov up front will fill that role for Russia going forward. And when you look at the context of their games from earlier this year, this is a team that, yeah, they're getting their asses kicked, but they have gotten better under manager Stanislav Cherchesov, even though he is unpopular with his players. He was unpopular with the Russian football critics. You look at Euro 2016, where Russia crashed out as one of the worst teams of the tournament. Absolutely abysmal performance under manager Leonid Slutsky. I do think Russia have gotten better. They've been preparing for the World Cup in the best way that they could have. And because they are in a very lenient group with Saudi Arabia and Egypt, they should be considered firm favorites to come in second, simply because they are the host nation and they could ride that wave of momentum. Now, especially with Mohamed Salah injured for Egypt, he may miss the first game. We don't know exactly what kind of role he will play for our team. That makes Russia firm favorites to come in second even more so. I picked Russia to come in through this group even before Salah's injury. I'm especially picking to come through now. Saudi Arabia, the first match, the opening match of the World Cup, Russia must win. Most likely, Russia must get the full 3 points and beat Saudi Arabia by at least a couple of goals, because their games will very likely increase in difficulty from there. They close out the group against Uruguay, who I suspect will make a deep run this tournament, and it's very hard to see how Russia can get one over on La Celeste. So Russia will most likely have to take care of business before the final match day in Group A. Let's run through the team a bit, shall we? Goalkeeper Igor Akinfeev, he's been there for a while, hasn't he? Defender Sergei Ignashevich. You have other players like Igor Smolenikov, Antonin Miranchuk, Alexander Golovin, Alexander Arokin. Up front, like I mentioned, Fyodor Smolov. Artem Zhyuba, who was one of the young stars of the Euro 2012 tournament, I remember. Alexander Samedov, he's getting up there in age, but he still provides that leadership for Russia as far as their creativity up front is concerned. So, Russia, they kind of have an older squad, but they still have a couple of new faces. Most notably, Denis Cherchesov, who a lot of Russians are very happy he'll be making his tournament debut for his country. So, Russia, ever since the USSR disbanded, they haven't really been a major relevant force in international football, with the exception of the 2008 run to the Euro semifinals. They've never advanced past the group stage as an independent nation yet, so they will look to make that differently this time around, especially at home. And the most important thing for Russia, what they want to do, they want to avoid becoming the next South Africa. They absolutely want to avoid the same fate as the first host nation to never advance. And even though this is not a team that has the makeup of a side that can go on a deep run in this tournament, if they were to divert the same fate as their African counterparts in 2010, that alone would be a success for Russia. You have to consider, even though they are not one of the best teams in Europe, if they fail to come out of their group, particularly given the generosity of the draw they were handed, it's a failure. It's a failure for Russia if they don't come through. So the amount of, the weight that's going to be on these players' shoulders, it's going to be immense, especially if they don't get the needed result in the first game against Saudi Arabia. And something that the manager Stanislav Cherchesov has done in naming his 23-man squad, which is revolutionary by Russian footballing standards, is a lot of these players don't play domestically in the Russian league. They do have experience in other European clubs, whereas in the past, a majority of Russian teams that went to tournaments in European championships and World Cups, most of them were locally based in the Russian league. Playing for like Lokomotiv Moscow, CSK of Moscow, Rubin Kazan, Samara. So I do like that he's gone with that bold endeavor. He has gone with a more diversified Russian team. And I think it's going to benefit them in this tournament. I do. Now, I predicted a year ago that Russia would do the reverse South Africa. They would not advance past the group stage of the Confederations Cup. I was right about that. But they will advance past the group stage of the World Cup. It was the reverse for South Africa. So 2009, South Africa got to the semifinals of the Confederations Cup, but did not advance the subsequent year in the World Cup. I do think Russia will manage to not fall prey to South Africa's infamous, record of being the only host nation to not come through. So they will take the inspiration from their home support, the pressure of the media, probably the government as well. And I think Russia will come through. I mean, like I said, these profile videos, they are not prediction videos, but I'll just come out and say that now. I don't see Russia not advancing unless they have a spectacularly poor tournament. And we know that host nations, they tend to do really well on home soil. Even South Africa, even though that South African team did not advance, they missed out on goal difference back in 2010. And with a much more favorable group this time for the hosts, Russia, they'll be okay, I think. Because it's not the same team from Euro 2016. A lot of Stanis Cherchesov, he gets, scrutinized a lot, but I do think he's a decent manager. I do think they've made strides under his tenure, and Russia will show that this summer.